The Journey of Betty and Barney Hill. A Gentle Story of Wonder and Stars. Chapter 1. The Evening Drive. September 19th, 1961. New Hampshire's White Mountains. The autumn evening wrapped around New Hampshire like a soft, familiar blanket. Betty and Barney Hill were driving home from their vacation in Montreal, their trusty 1957 Chevrolet humming along Route 3 through the White Mountains. The radio played gentle melodies from Boston, and the dashboard lights cast a warm amber glow across their faces as they settled in for the long drive back to Portsmouth. It was the kind of peaceful September night that makes you grateful for simple pleasures, the comfort of good company, the promise of home waiting ahead, and the vast canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear mountain air. Betty sat beside her husband, watching the familiar landscape drift by in the moonlight. They'd been married for 5 years now, and these quiet drives together had become some of their favorite times. Just the two of them, the open road, and conversations that meandered like the winding highway itself. Barney kept his eyes on the road, his steady hands guiding them through the gentle curves of Route 3. At 39, he worked as a postal clerk in Boston, a job that suited his methodical nature and attention to detail. Betty, at 41, was a social worker who spent her days helping families navigate life's challenges with patience and compassion. They were practical people, grounded in reality, with their feet firmly planted in the everyday world of work and home and community. The kind of folks who read the morning paper, tended their garden, and went to church on Sundays. The kind of people who noticed unusual things but approached them with healthy skepticism and common sense, which is what made what happened next so remarkable. "Look at that star, honey," Betty said softly, pointing through the windshield at what appeared to be an unusually bright light moving slowly across the sky. "That's odd. It seems to be changing direction." Barney slowed the car and pulled over to the side of the road. They'd driven this route many times, and they knew the night sky above the White Mountains well enough to recognize when something didn't quite belong. The light wasn't behaving like an airplane. It moved too smoothly, too silently, with none of the predictable patterns of aircraft they were accustomed to seeing. Instead, it seemed to dance gently across the stars, growing brighter and dimmer in a rhythm that reminded Betty of a firefly's gentle pulse. "Maybe it's a satellite," Barney suggested, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. The space age was still young in 1961, and satellites were still new enough to capture people's imagination. But as they watched, the light began to move in ways that no satellite could, drifting closer, seeming to follow the contours of the mountain peaks, pulsing with colors that shifted from white to amber to a soft, almost ethereal blue. "It's beautiful," Betty whispered. And indeed it was. Whatever this mysterious light might be, there was something peaceful about its gentle movement across the star-filled sky, something that spoke of vast distances and quiet wonder rather than anything frightening or threatening. They stood beside their car for several minutes, watching the light perform its silent dance among the constellations. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees and the promise of autumn. Night sounds surrounded them. The gentle whisper of wind through the trees, the distant call of an owl, the soft rustle of small creatures going about their nocturnal business. It was a moment of perfect tranquility, two people sharing something unexplained and beautiful under the vast New Hampshire sky. "We should probably get going," Barney said eventually, though he seemed reluctant to leave. "It's getting late, and we've still got a ways to drive." Betty nodded, taking one last look at the mysterious light that continued its graceful journey across the heavens. Whatever it was, witnessing its silent passage had felt like a gift, a reminder that the universe held wonders beyond their everyday experience. They got back in the car and continued south on Route 3, the radio playing softly as they settled back into the comfortable rhythm of their nighttime drive. The mysterious light followed them for a while, keeping pace with their car as it drifted along the mountain ridges, but gradually it faded into the distance until it was just another star in the vast tapestry of the night sky. "That was something special," Betty said quietly, reaching over to squeeze Barney's hand. Sure was, he replied, his voice carrying the contentment of someone who'd witnessed something beautiful and inexplicable. Neither of them realized that their evening of gentle wonder was just beginning. Neither of them knew that the peaceful light they'd watched with such fascination was about to become part of a story that would change their lives forever. As they drove through the quiet mountain darkness, with the radio playing soft melodies and the stars shining down like a blessing, Betty and Barney Hill were about to experience something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the boundaries between the possible and the impossible. Something gentle, something mysterious, something that would fill their dreams with colors they'd never seen and memories they couldn't quite grasp. The light was still out there, moving among the stars with patient, purposeful grace. Waiting. Chapter 2. The light grows closer. Somewhere along Route 3. The mysterious light began to descend like a falling star that had decided not to fall. Instead of racing across the sky and disappearing, it drifted downward with the gentle grace of a soap bubble floating on a summer breeze. Betty and Barney watched through their windshield as the beautiful, pulsing glow grew larger and more defined, its colors shifting from soft white to warm amber to that same ethereal blue they'd noticed earlier. "Honey, I think it's coming toward us," Betty observed, her voice filled with wonder rather than concern. There was something peaceful about the way the light moved. No sudden motions, no aggressive behavior, just a quiet, purposeful approach that seemed almost friendly. Barney slowed the car again, his natural caution warring with his curiosity. In all his years of night driving through New England, he'd never seen anything quite like this. The light seemed to respond to their presence, growing brighter when they slowed down, dimming slightly when they sped up, as if it were trying to maintain just the right distance for comfortable observation. "Should we stop again?" Betty asked, and Barney could hear the excitement in her voice. His wife had always been drawn to mysteries, always ready to explore the unexplained with an open mind and a sense of adventure. "Let's see what it does," Barney decided, pulling into a scenic overlook that provided a clear view of the sky above the valley. They got out of the car and stood together in the crisp mountain air, watching as the light continued its graceful descent. Now they could see that it wasn't just a simple point of light. As it drew closer, they began to make out a structure, something circular and smooth, with gentle curves that reminded Betty of a child's drawing of a flying saucer. But there was nothing cartoonish about this craft. It moved with elegant precision, its surface seeming to shimmer and flow like liquid mercury in the moonlight. "It's gorgeous," Betty breathed, and Barney had to agree. Whatever this thing was, it possessed a beauty that went beyond anything in their experience. The way it caught and reflected the starlight, the smooth confidence of its movement, the soft musical hum that seemed to emanate from its very structure. Everything about it suggested advanced engineering married to artistic sensibility. The craft, for lack of a better word, settled into a gentle hover about 50 feet above the tree line. From this distance, they could see what appeared to be windows or viewing ports arranged around its perimeter, glowing with that same warm, welcoming light they'd first noticed among the stars. "Look, Barney," Betty said softly, pointing toward the craft. I think there are people inside." Through the glowing windows they could make out silhouettes, figures that moved with purpose and grace, seemingly going about some kind of work or observation. The figures appeared humanoid but different somehow, with proportions that suggested they might be taller and more slender than typical humans. But there was nothing threatening about their movements. They seemed calm, methodical, almost scientific in their approach to whatever they were doing. One figure appeared to be operating some kind of instrument panel, while others seemed to be looking outward, perhaps observing the mountain landscape or the night sky. "They're beautiful too," Betty whispered. And indeed there was something aesthetically pleasing about the way the figures moved, a flowing dance-like quality that suggested beings who were completely comfortable in their environment. The craft began to emit a series of soft, melodious tones, not quite music, but not random noise either. The sounds seemed to carry meaning, like a language composed of pure harmony. Betty found herself swaying gently to the rhythm, while Barney felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. "It's like they're saying hello," Betty said, and somehow that interpretation felt exactly right. The tones had a welcoming quality, an invitation to shared wonder rather than anything intimidating or hostile. As if responding to her observation, the craft's lights pulsed in what seemed like a pattern. 3 long pulses, followed by 2 short ones, then 3 long pulses again. Betty found herself unconsciously counting along, while Barney raised his hand in a tentative wave. The response was immediate and delightful. The craft's lights flickered in what could only be described as an acknowledgement, and the melodious tones shifted into what sounded distinctly like laughter. Not mocking laughter, but the kind of gentle amusement that comes from unexpected joy. "They see us," Barney marveled, his voice filled with the same wonder that a child might feel upon discovering that animals at the zoo were aware of their presence. For several minutes they stood in comfortable communion with their mysterious visitors. The craft maintained its gentle hover, its occupants seeming content to observe and be observed. The mountain night wrapped around them all, humans and visitors alike, with the same peaceful embrace. Betty felt a strange sense of recognition, as if she were looking at old friends she hadn't seen in a very long time. Barney experienced a deep calm that reminded him of the most restful sleep he'd ever had. Both of them felt an overwhelming sense that they were witnessing something profoundly important, not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. The craft's lights began to shift to deeper, more soothing hues, soft purples and gentle greens that seemed designed to promote relaxation and tranquility. The musical tones evolved into something that sounded almost like a lullaby, a cosmic bedtime song that seemed to say, "Rest now, everything is well." Betty felt her eyelids growing heavy while Barney experienced a floating sensation, as if he were being gently lifted from the concerns of everyday life into a realm of perfect peace and safety. "Maybe we should head home," one of them suggested, though later neither could remember who had spoken first. They walked back to their car in a dreamy, contented state, like people leaving a wonderful concert or emerging from a particularly beautiful movie. The mysterious craft continued its gentle hover, its lights now pulsing in what seemed like a farewell rhythm. As they drove away, Betty turned for one last look at their peaceful visitors. The craft's lights flashed once, a final friendly goodbye, before it began to rise slowly back toward the stars. "That was amazing," Betty said drowsily, settling back into her seat. "Incredible," Barney agreed, his voice carrying the satisfied exhaustion of someone who had experienced something truly extraordinary. The radio continued to play soft melodies as they drove through the quiet mountain night, both of them feeling blessed to have witnessed such beauty and wonder. Neither of them noticed that their car's clock had somehow gained 2 hours since they'd last checked it. Neither of them noticed that the familiar landmarks along Route 3 seemed to be passing in a different order than they remembered. All they knew was that they felt peaceful, content, and grateful for whatever gentle miracle they had just experienced under the New Hampshire stars. Chapter 3. The Floating Dream, Somewhere Between Memory and Wonder. What happened next felt like the most peaceful dream either of them had ever experienced. Betty found herself floating gently through a space filled with soft, swirling lights that moved like aurora borealis made of silk and starlight. The sensation was remarkably similar to those moments just before sleep, when the body begins to weightlessly drift between waking and dreaming, except this floating felt more real, more deliberate, more guided. Colors surrounded her that she'd never seen before, hues that existed somewhere between blue and silver, between green and gold, shifting and blending with the fluid grace of watercolors on wet paper. The lights seemed to pulse with their own gentle heartbeat, creating a rhythm that perfectly matched her breathing and made her feel completely safe and relaxed. Barney experienced his own version of the floating dream. He felt as though he were being carried on warm air currents, like a bird riding thermals with effortless grace. The sensation was profoundly restful, as if every muscle in his body had finally been allowed to completely relax after years of holding unnecessary tension. Around him, geometric patterns of light danced and spiraled, not harsh or angular, but flowing and organic, like the mathematical beauty found in flower petals or seashells. The patterns seemed to tell stories without words, conveying concepts and emotions directly to his consciousness in ways that bypassed normal language entirely. Both of them felt the presence of their gentle hosts, beings who radiated kindness and curiosity in equal measure. These weren't the frightening alien figures of science fiction movies, but rather seemed like cosmic librarians or interstellar naturalists, fascinated by the diversity of life they encountered in their travels. The beings communicated through something that felt like shared thoughts, but softer and more respectful than telepathy is usually portrayed. It was more like having someone place beautiful images and concepts directly into your mind, the way you might share a photograph or a piece of music with a friend. Betty found herself in what seemed like a comfortable room, with curved walls that glowed with their own gentle light. The furniture, if it could be called that, seemed to grow organically from the floor, shaped to perfectly support the human form. Everything was designed with ergonomic perfection, as if the beings understood exactly how to create the most comfortable possible environment for their human guests. One of the beings, tall, graceful, with large, kind eyes, showed Betty a three-dimensional map made of pure light. Stars and planets danced in miniature before her, connected by glowing threads that showed the paths of travel between worlds. The beings seemed delighted to share their knowledge, pointing out various stellar neighborhoods with the enthusiasm of a proud tour guide. "This is where we come from," the being seemed to say without words, indicating a cluster of stars that pulsed with warm, welcoming light. "And this is your beautiful world," they continued, highlighting Earth with special reverence, as if our planet held a particularly precious place in their cosmic understanding. Meanwhile, Barney found himself in what appeared to be an observation chamber, with transparent walls that offered stunning views of the Earth below and the star-filled universe beyond. The perspective was breathtaking, like being in the most advanced planetarium ever created, except this was real, and he was actually floating among the stars. His hosts, beings of similar grace and kindness, seemed fascinated by his reactions to their technology. They showed him instruments that appeared to respond to thought rather than touch, displays that conveyed information through color and pattern rather than text or numbers. Everything was intuitive, elegant, and remarkably beautiful. One of the beings presented Barney with what seemed like a medical examination, but conducted with such gentleness and respect that it felt more like a peaceful visit to the most advanced health spa in the universe. Soft lights played over his skin, somehow conveying complete information about his physical condition, while making him feel more relaxed than he'd ever felt in his life. The examination seemed designed to satisfy scientific curiosity, rather than to cause any discomfort. The beings appeared genuinely interested in human physiology, not in an invasive way, but with the respectful fascination that a marine biologist might show when studying a beautiful and previously unknown species of fish. Throughout both of their experiences, Betty and Barney felt an overwhelming sense that they were in the presence of benevolent scientists, explorers and researchers who traveled between worlds, not to conquer or exploit, but to learn and understand the magnificent diversity of life in the universe. The beings seemed to find humans particularly fascinating, apparently delighted by the complexity of human emotions and the beauty of human creativity. They showed Betty and Barney images of other worlds they'd visited, planets with crimson skies and crystalline forests, worlds where the oceans glowed with their own light, places where the very air shimmered with colors that had no names in human language. But always, they returned to Earth in their discussions, expressing what seemed like genuine admiration for the beauty of human art, music, and literature. They appeared to understand that humans were a young species with tremendous potential, deserving of respect and protection rather than judgment or interference. The entire experience felt like being welcomed into a cosmic family, beings from across the galaxy who had dedicated themselves to understanding and preserving the precious diversity of intelligent life. Betty and Barney felt honored to be included in this grand fellowship, to be recognized as representatives of humanity's potential for growth and wisdom. As their gentle journey continued, both of them felt their consciousness expanding, their understanding of the universe becoming broader and more inclusive. They began to see Earth not as the center of existence, but as one precious jewel in an infinite crown of worlds, each unique and valuable in its own way. The experience was profoundly spiritual without being religious, deeply educational without being overwhelming, and completely transformative while remaining gentle and respectful of their human limitations. Time seemed to flow differently in this space between worlds, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down, but always in service of ensuring that Betty and Barney could fully appreciate and understand what they were experiencing without feeling rushed or pressured. And always, beneath every interaction, lay the fundamental message that they were safe, valued, and cared for by beings whose wisdom and kindness spanned the stars. Chapter 4. The Room of Wonders. Inside the floating sanctuary. The room Betty found herself in defied every assumption she'd ever made about architecture and design. The walls curved in impossible ways, seeming to extend infinitely upward while somehow remaining intimately cozy. They glowed with their own soft light, not harsh or artificial, but with the gentle warmth of candlelight filtered through mother of pearl. The illumination seemed to respond to her emotional state, growing brighter when she felt curious and dimming to soothing levels when she needed to rest. The being who served as her guide, she thought of him as the scholar because of his patient, teaching demeanor, moved with fluid grace around the space. He was tall and elegant, with features that suggested both great age and eternal youth. His eyes were larger than human eyes, but kind and expressive, radiating the sort of gentle intelligence she'd seen in the faces of her favorite professors and librarians. "Welcome," he seemed to say without speaking, and the word carried layers of meaning that included not just greeting, but also honor, curiosity, and genuine pleasure at her presence. The scholar showed Betty wonders that made her feel like a child visiting the world's most amazing museum. Surfaces that could display any image simply by thinking about it. Musical instruments that played melodies composed of pure emotion rather than sound. Books that told their stories through three-dimensional scenes that unfolded in the air above their pages. "We are collectors of knowledge," the scholar explained through their wordless communication. "We travel between worlds to understand the beautiful diversity of life and consciousness throughout the universe." Betty found herself looking at a display that showed the history of various civilizations, not as dry historical facts, but as living stories filled with the dreams, struggles, and triumphs of countless beings across countless worlds. She saw the rise and fall of cities that spanned continents, the development of art forms that used mathematics as their medium, the evolution of species that communicated through color changes in their crystalline skin. "Your species is particularly fascinating," the scholar continued, and Betty could feel his genuine admiration. "Humans possess such remarkable creativity and emotional depth. Your art, your music, your stories, they reveal a complexity of consciousness that is quite rare in the universe." He showed her examples, human paintings that had moved beings on distant worlds to tears, human music that had been adapted and performed in concert halls orbiting other stars, human literature that had been translated into forms of communication that transcended language entirely. "We study you not to judge or change, but to appreciate and learn," the scholar explained. "Every species we encounter teaches us something new about the potential of consciousness to create beauty and meaning." Meanwhile, in another part of the craft, Barney was having his own conversation with a being he thought of as the navigator, someone whose role seemed to involve guiding their vessel through the vast reaches of space. The navigator was showing Barney the three-dimensional star map that Betty had also seen, but from a pilot's perspective. "Space is not empty," the navigator explained through their shared consciousness. "It flows with currents and tides just like your oceans. We learn to read these cosmic currents the way your sea captains learn to read wind and wave." The map showed not just the positions of stars and planets, but the invisible highways of energy that connected them, streams of force that could carry a vessel across unimaginable distances in the time it might take to drive from one city to another on Earth. "Your planet sits at the intersection of several major currents," the navigator continued, indicating Earth's position in the cosmic flow. This makes it both easily accessible to travelers like ourselves and naturally protected from those who might not share our peaceful intentions. Barney felt a deep sense of awe as he realized that Earth wasn't just a random world spinning in empty space, but part of a vast, interconnected system of cosmic geography that stretched across the entire galaxy. Both Betty and Barney were struck by their host's obvious affection for Earth and humanity. These beings had visited countless worlds, encountered hundreds of different species, yet they spoke of humans with special fondness and respect. Young species often possess qualities that older civilizations have forgotten, the scholar explained to Betty. Your passion, your curiosity, your ability to find wonder in simple things. These are precious gifts that we try to preserve and learn from. The beings seemed particularly impressed by human art and creativity. They showed Betty and Barney examples of how human cultural achievements had influenced civilizations across the galaxy. Sculptures inspired by human forms standing in alien gardens. Symphonies based on human compositions being performed for audiences of beings who had never seen a human face. Beauty translates across all barriers, the navigator told Barney, as they watched a recording of a human ballet being performed by graceful beings with crystalline wings on a world where the gravity was so light that dancers could leap incredible heights. Consciousness recognizes consciousness, regardless of the form it takes. The experience felt like being welcomed into an exclusive university where the curriculum included the entire history of intelligent life in the galaxy. Betty and Barney felt honored to represent humanity in this cosmic classroom, and their hosts seemed genuinely interested in their perspectives and reactions to everything they were shown. "What do you think of when you look at the stars?" the scholar asked Betty, and she found herself sharing childhood memories of lying on summer grass and wondering if anyone out there was looking back. "What dreams do humans have for the future?" the navigator asked Barney, and he found himself describing humanity's hopes for space exploration, for contact with other civilizations, for growth beyond the boundaries of a single world. Their hosts listened with the respectful attention of beings who understood that every species' dreams and perspectives added valuable pieces to the infinite puzzle of cosmic understanding. As the gentle examination and exchange continued, both Betty and Barney felt their consciousness expanding, their understanding of their place in the universe becoming both humbler and more significant. They were representatives of a young, creative, passionate species that had attracted the attention and affection of beings whose wisdom spanned the galaxy. They were part of something magnificent. They were valued members of a cosmic community that stretched across the stars, and they were completely, perfectly safe in the care of beings whose dedication to understanding and preserving consciousness made them the universe's most benevolent guardians. Chapter 5. The Garden of Memory, where thoughts bloom like flowers. In another part of the craft, Betty discovered something that took her breath away. A room that seemed to exist purely for the cultivation and preservation of memories. The walls were alive with moving images, like windows that looked out onto 1,000 different worlds and times. Some showed landscapes of impossible beauty, forests where the trees bore fruit made of pure light, oceans that reflected not the sky above them, but the dreams of the creatures swimming in their depths, mountains carved from crystallized music that sang softly in harmonious chords. But most beautiful of all were the memories of beings from across the galaxy. Moments of joy, discovery, and connection preserved like precious flowers in an eternal garden. Memory is the most precious treasure in the universe, explained the being Betty had begun thinking of as the Keeper. This being seemed older than the others, with an aura of deep wisdom and infinite patience. Their role appeared to involve preserving and cataloging the experiences of countless civilizations. Each conscious being that lives and thinks and feels adds something unique to the great tapestry of existence. The Keeper continued, "We collect these experiences not to possess them, but to ensure they are never lost or forgotten." Betty watched in wonder as memories played out around her like living stories. She saw the first steps of children on a dozen different worlds, their various forms of locomotion adapted to environments she could barely imagine. She witnessed the moment when a young being on a distant planet first looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond their world, a moment of cosmic awakening that apparently occurred on every world where consciousness evolved. "Your memories are particularly beautiful," the keeper told Betty, and suddenly she found her own experiences playing out around her like a gentle, nostalgic movie. But these weren't just visual memories. They included the emotions, the sensations, even the hopes and dreams that had accompanied each moment. She saw herself as a child, lying in summer grass and making pictures out of cloud formations. She felt again the overwhelming love she'd experienced on her wedding day with Barney. She relived the satisfaction of helping a troubled family find stability through her social work, the joy of quiet evenings reading together, the simple contentment of gardening on weekend mornings. "Human memories have such emotional depth," the keeper observed with obvious admiration. "Most species remember facts and events, but humans remember feelings. This gives your experiences a richness that is quite extraordinary." Betty realized that her hosts weren't just studying human physiology or technology. They were explorers of consciousness itself, fascinated by the different ways awareness could manifest across the universe. They collected experiences the way human naturalists might collect and study different species of butterflies, not to harm or exploit, but to understand and appreciate the magnificent diversity of life. Meanwhile, Barney was experiencing his own journey through preserved memories in a different part of the craft. The navigator was showing him memories of space travel from the perspective of dozens of different species, the wonder of a being's first view of their home planet from space, the excitement of making contact with a new civilization, the peaceful satisfaction of establishing trade and cultural exchange between worlds. "Every species approaches the stars differently," the navigator explained. "Some are driven by curiosity, others by necessity, still others by a desire to share their gifts with the universe. But all conscious beings eventually look up and wonder what lies beyond." Barney found himself watching the memories of other beings' first space flights, some in vessels that resembled crystalline flowers, others in craft that seemed grown rather than built, still others in ships that appeared to be living creatures bred specifically for space travel. "Humans will join us among the stars someday," the navigator said with quiet confidence. "Your species has the curiosity, the courage, and the creativity necessary for cosmic citizenship. We simply wanted to meet you a little early, to let you know that you're not alone, and that when you're ready, you'll find friends waiting for you out here." Both Betty and Barney felt profoundly moved by this revelation, that their mysterious encounter wasn't random but part of a gentle introduction to a galactic community that welcomed new members with patience and support. "Why us?" Betty asked the keeper, and the answer came with warm affection. "Because you were ready," the keeper replied. "Not ready for full contact. That would be overwhelming for your species at this stage of development, but ready for a gentle preview. Ready to carry back the knowledge that consciousness is not limited to one world, that intelligence takes many forms, and that the universe is filled with beings who wish you well." The experience in the Garden of Memory felt like being given access to a cosmic library, where every book was written in the language of direct experience. Betty and Barney found themselves understanding concepts and perspectives that would have been impossible to grasp through words alone. They saw civilizations that had learned to live in perfect harmony with their environments, species that had transcended the need for physical form while maintaining individual identity, beings who had mastered time travel and used it primarily to appreciate the beauty of temporal flow rather than to change or manipulate events. "The universe is so much more wonderful than we ever imagined," Betty whispered, and the keeper's expression conveyed profound joy at her realization. "And it becomes more wonderful with each new species that joins our community," the keeper replied. "Your human perspectives, your creativity, your emotional depth, these will enrich all of our experiences when you're ready to share them more fully." As their time in the Garden of Memory drew to a close, both Betty and Barney felt they had been given a glimpse of their species' future, a future where humanity would take its place among the stars not as conquerors or exploiters, but as valued contributors to a cosmic civilization based on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and the celebration of consciousness in all its magnificent forms. They had been chosen not for any special abilities or status, but simply because they were ready to receive this gentle message of hope and welcome. They were ambassadors, carrying back to their world the knowledge that humanity had friends among the stars, beings who were patiently waiting for the day when formal contact could be established without causing fear or disruption. The Garden of Memory would remain with them always, a source of wonder and reassurance that they were part of something far greater and more beautiful than they had ever dared to imagine. Chapter 6. The Gentle Return. Coming home with starlight in their hearts. The transition back to ordinary consciousness felt like waking from the most peaceful sleep imaginable. Betty found herself gently floating back to awareness, surrounded by the same soft, colorful lights that had welcomed her aboard the craft. But now those lights seemed to be carrying her home, supporting her with the tenderness of a cosmic lullaby that guided her consciousness back to her familiar human form. The keeper was there with her during the transition, radiating the same paternal care that a loving parent might show while tucking a child into bed after a wonderful day of adventure. "The memories will remain," the keeper assured her, "though they may feel like dreams until your mind is ready to fully process what you've experienced. This is natural and necessary. Your consciousness needs time to integrate such expanded awareness." Betty felt a deep sense of gratitude for the kindness and patience her hosts had shown. They had shared wonders with her that stretched the very boundaries of imagination, yet they had done so with such gentle care that she never felt overwhelmed or frightened. "Will we meet again?" she asked, though the question came not in words but in the wordless communication she had learned during her time aboard their craft. "When you're ready," the keeper replied with a warmth that felt like a promise. "The universe is patient, and friendship transcends both time and distance. We will be here when your species is prepared for more formal contact." Meanwhile, Barney was experiencing his own gentle return to ordinary awareness. The navigator had guided him to a comfortable resting place where the craft's walls had become transparent, offering one last magnificent view of the Earth below and the star-filled cosmos beyond. "Take this vision with you," the navigator suggested. "Let it remind you that your world is precious and beautiful, worthy of protection and care. And let it remind you that you are not alone in the universe, that consciousness exists everywhere, in forms both familiar and wondrous." Barney felt his awareness gradually settling back into his human body, like settling into a favorite chair after a long journey. The expanded consciousness he had experienced while aboard the craft didn't disappear, but rather compressed itself into a form his human mind could carry without strain. "How will I remember?" he asked, and the navigator's response came with gentle humor. "Memory is like a flower that blooms when the season is right. These experiences will return to you gradually, in dreams and quiet moments, as your consciousness becomes ready to integrate them fully." Both Betty and Barney felt themselves being guided back to their physical forms with the same careful attention to comfort and safety that had characterized their entire experience. Their hosts seemed to understand exactly how much expansion human consciousness could accommodate without damage, and they calibrated every aspect of the return journey to ensure their guests' well-being. As awareness of their physical bodies returned, they found themselves back in their car, parked beside the same scenic overlook where they had first stopped to observe the mysterious light. The radio was still playing soft melodies, and the dashboard clock showed exactly the time it should, as if no time had passed at all, or perhaps more time than they could account for. Betty and Barney looked at each other with expressions of profound wonder and contentment. They both felt changed by their experience, expanded in ways that would take years to fully understand, yet completely grounded in their love for each other and their appreciation for their earthly life. "Did that really happen?" Betty asked softly, though even as she spoke the words, she knew the answer. The peace she felt, the expanded awareness that hummed quietly in the background of her consciousness, the sense of being part of something magnificent and cosmic, these were not the products of imagination or dream. "I think it did," Barney replied, reaching over to take her hand. "I think we just had the most beautiful experience of our lives." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the stars and feeling the deep satisfaction that comes from having been welcomed into something far greater than themselves. The mysterious craft was nowhere to be seen, but they both felt its presence like a blessing, a gentle reminder that the universe was populated by beings of wisdom and kindness. "We should probably head home," Betty said eventually, though she felt reluctant to end this perfect moment of cosmic connection. "Yes," Barney agreed, starting the engine, "but I don't think we'll ever really leave this place behind. It's part of us now." As they drove through the quiet New Hampshire night, both of them felt the profound contentment that comes from having been touched by wonder. The familiar landscape looked somehow different, not changed, but seen from a broader perspective that included their new understanding of Earth's place in the galactic community. The radio played gentle music as they made their way home to Portsmouth, and both Betty and Barney found themselves humming along with melodies that seemed to echo the cosmic harmonies they had heard aboard the craft. Their house, when they finally reached it, looked exactly the same as it had when they left for their vacation. But they were not the same people who had departed for Montreal several days earlier. They were now carriers of a cosmic message, ambassadors who had been gently chosen to carry back the knowledge that humanity was not alone. As they unpacked their car and prepared for bed, both Betty and Barney felt the memories of their extraordinary journey settling into their minds like seeds that would bloom in their own time. Some details remained crystal clear: the kindness in their host's eyes, the beauty of the star maps, the profound sense of being welcomed into a cosmic family. Other memories felt more like half-remembered dreams, present but elusive, waiting for the right moment to fully resurface. "Sweet dreams," Betty whispered as they settled into their familiar bed, and both of them smiled at the deeper meaning those words now carried. Outside their bedroom window, the stars shone with new significance, not distant points of light, but neighbors and friends, part of a vast community that stretched across the galaxy. They slept deeply and peacefully, their dreams filled with gentle lights and colors that had no earthly names. Chapter 7. Dreams and Remembering. The seeds of memory begin to bloom. In the weeks that followed their return from Montreal, Betty and Barney found their dreams filled with fragments of beauty and wonder. Betty would wake in the morning with vague memories of floating through spaces filled with soft, swirling colors. Sometimes she dreamed of conversations conducted without words, exchanges of ideas and emotions that felt more real than ordinary dialogue. In these dreams, she was always surrounded by beings of infinite kindness who treated her like an honored guest in the most welcoming home imaginable. "I had the strangest dream last night," she would tell Barney over breakfast, trying to capture images that seemed to slip away like morning mist the moment she tried to focus on them. There were these beautiful lights, and people who weren't quite people, and everything felt so peaceful and safe. Barney was experiencing similar nocturnal visions. His dreams were filled with star maps that moved and flowed like living things, showing him pathways between worlds that pulsed with gentle energy. He dreamed of conversations with wise beings who spoke of time and space as if they were old friends, and of viewing Earth from perspectives that filled him with overwhelming love for their small, precious planet. "It's like there's something I'm supposed to remember," he would say, stirring his coffee and gazing out at their garden with thoughtful eyes. "Something important that happened, but every time I try to grasp it fully, it slides away." Neither of them felt frustrated by their inability to recall complete details of their experience. Instead, they felt a deep sense of patience, as if some internal wisdom assured them that the memories would return when the time was right. The fragments they did remember filled them with such peace and wonder that they were content to let the fuller picture emerge gradually. Their friends and family noticed changes in both Betty and Barney, though they couldn't quite put their fingers on what was different. There was a new serenity about them, a sense that they had touched something profound that had left them more centered and at peace with themselves and the world around them. "You both seem different somehow," Betty's sister Ella observed during a Sunday dinner. "Calmer, maybe? Like you figured out some secret about life that the rest of us are still working on." Betty and Barney exchanged a look across the dinner table, a shared understanding that they did indeed possess something special, even if they couldn't fully articulate what it was. "We had some interesting experiences on our trip," Betty said simply, and Barney nodded in agreement. "The kind that change your perspective on things," he added. And again they shared that look of mutual understanding. As the months passed, the dream memories became more vivid and coherent. Betty began to recall specific conversations with her gentle hosts, remembering their curiosity about human emotions and creativity. She remembered being shown artworks from across the galaxy, musical compositions that used mathematics as their medium, and stories told through pure sensation rather than words. "They were so interested in how we think and feel," she told Barney during one of their evening walks. "Like we were these fascinating specimens, but in the nicest possible way. They genuinely seemed to admire human consciousness." Barney's memories focused more on the technical aspects of his experience, the star maps, the propulsion systems that worked by riding currents of cosmic energy, the navigation techniques that treated space like a living, flowing medium rather than empty void. "They've been traveling between stars for thousands of years," he would say, pausing to look up at the night sky. "And they've never encountered a species quite like us. They said our creativity and emotional depth make us unique in the galaxy." Both of them began to understand that they had been chosen not randomly, but because they possessed the right combination of openness and stability to serve as gentle ambassadors between species. They had been selected to carry back a message of hope and welcome, to plant seeds in human consciousness that would bloom when the time was right for more formal contact. "We're like advanced scouts," Betty realized one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "They wanted to let us know that we have friends out there, beings who wish us well and are waiting for us to join them when we're ready." The realization filled them both with a profound sense of purpose. They weren't just two people who had experienced something extraordinary. They were carriers of one of the most important messages in human history: that consciousness exists throughout the universe, that intelligence takes many forms, and that humanity is destined to take its place among a cosmic community based on wisdom, compassion, and mutual respect. As their memories continued to clarify, they began to understand the true scope of what they had experienced. They had been given a preview of humanity's future, a glimpse of the wonders that awaited when their species was ready to join the galactic community. "I think they showed us what we could become," Barney said thoughtfully. "Not just space travelers, but beings who use our creativity and emotional depth to contribute something beautiful to the cosmic conversation. We're proof that contact is possible," Betty added, "that humans can interact with other forms of consciousness without fear or aggression. We're like the first successful experiment in peaceful interspecies communication." Their dreams continued to bring back memories of the kindness and patience their hosts had shown, the careful attention to their comfort and well-being, the obvious affection these cosmic beings felt for humanity, despite having never formally made contact with Earth. "They love us," Betty realized with wonder. These beings who have traveled across the galaxy, who have seen countless civilizations, they genuinely love humanity for what we are and what we might become. This knowledge filled both of them with a deep sense of responsibility and hope. They were guardians of a cosmic secret, keepers of knowledge that would someday transform human understanding of our place in the universe. But for now, they were content to let the memories bloom in their own time, to carry their message of hope quietly and patiently, and to serve as living proof that the universe is filled with wonder, wisdom, and beings of infinite compassion who wish nothing but good for the human species. The stars above their New Hampshire home no longer seemed distant and cold, but warm and welcoming. A reminder that consciousness exists everywhere, taking magnificent and diverse forms, all connected by the shared miracle of awareness itself. Chapter 8. The Gift of Knowing Living with Cosmic Secrets. Years passed, and the memories that had once felt like half-remembered dreams crystallized into vivid, detailed recollections of one of the most extraordinary experiences in human history. Betty and Barney learned to live with their cosmic secret gracefully, carrying their knowledge like a precious gift that brought them daily comfort and wonder. They understood that they had been entrusted with something magnificent, proof that the universe is populated by beings of wisdom and kindness, who watched over developing civilizations with patient care. In quiet moments, usually during their evening walks or while working in their garden, one or the other would share a newly recovered memory. "I remembered something else about the star map," Barney said one autumn evening as they raked leaves in their backyard. "They showed me how the energy currents between stars create a kind of cosmic weather system. Space isn't empty at all. It's alive with flowing patterns that connect everything in the galaxy. The keeper told me that every conscious being that has ever lived leaves a kind of impression in the fabric of reality," Betty would reply, pausing in her work to look up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, like ripples in a pond that never really disappear. "We're all connected across time and space by the simple fact that we think and feel and wonder about existence." Their neighbors and friends knew that something had changed Betty and Barney during their trip to Montreal, though no one could quite identify what it was. There was a peacefulness about them, a sense of people who had found answers to questions they hadn't even known they were asking. "You two always seem so content," their friend Margaret observed during a dinner party. "Like you figured out some secret about how to be happy in this crazy world." Betty and Barney exchanged one of their knowing glances, the kind of wordless communication they had developed since their experience, as if their encounter with telepathic beings had enhanced their ability to understand each other without speaking. "I guess we've learned to appreciate the bigger picture," Betty replied diplomatically. "There's so much beauty and wonder in existence when you really stop to think about it." What their friends couldn't know was that Betty and Barney now understood existence to include civilizations spanning thousands of worlds, consciousness taking forms beyond human imagination, and a galactic community dedicated to preserving and celebrating the miracle of awareness wherever it arose. They had become quiet ambassadors of cosmic perspective, influencing everyone around them through their transformed worldview rather than through dramatic revelations. People were drawn to their serenity, their sense of proportion, their ability to find wonder in simple, everyday experiences. "You know what I realized?" Betty said one morning as they shared coffee and watched the sunrise paint their garden in golden light. "They didn't just show us their civilization. They showed us how to see our own world through cosmic eyes. Everything looks different when you understand that consciousness is precious and rare and beautiful wherever it exists." This realization had gradually transformed how they approached their daily lives. Betty's work as a social worker became infused with a deeper understanding of the preciousness of human consciousness and the importance of helping each person realize their unique potential. Barney approached his job at the Postal Service with renewed appreciation for the intricate networks that connect human communities, seeing parallels with the cosmic currents that connected civilizations across the galaxy. "Every person we meet is a unique expression of consciousness," Barney reflected. "When you really understand that, really feel it in your bones, it changes how you treat everyone you encounter." Their marriage had deepened too, enriched by their shared experience of cosmic wonder and their mutual understanding of humanity's place in the greater universe. They felt like co-conspirators in the most benevolent conspiracy imaginable, guardians of knowledge that would someday help transform human civilization. "Sometimes I feel like we're living in two times at once," Betty mused during one of their stargazing sessions. "The present, where we're just two people in New Hampshire living ordinary lives, and the future, where humanity has joined that beautiful galactic community we glimpsed. Maybe that's our real purpose," Barney suggested, "to live as examples of what humans could become, more peaceful, more aware, more connected to the cosmic perspective." They began to understand that their encounter had been carefully orchestrated, not just to introduce them to galactic civilization, but to plant seeds that would gradually influence human consciousness. They were living proof that contact was possible, that humans could interact with other forms of consciousness without fear or aggression, and that such encounters could be profoundly transformative in the most positive ways. "We're like prototype ambassadors," Betty realized with a smile. "They chose us to demonstrate that humans are ready for this kind of contact, even if our species as a whole isn't prepared yet." The knowledge brought with it a deep sense of responsibility and hope. They understood that they were part of a larger plan, a gradual, gentle process of preparing humanity for eventual formal contact with the galactic community. Their experience was one of many such encounters happening around the world, each one carefully chosen to maximize positive impact while minimizing cultural disruption. Someday, when our children or grandchildren look up at the stars, they'll know for certain that friends are looking back, Barney said with quiet confidence. And maybe our experience helped make that future possible. As they grew older, Betty and Barney found that their memories of the encounter became even more vivid and meaningful. Details that had once seemed like dreams revealed themselves as profound teachings about consciousness, creativity, and the cosmic significance of every thinking being. They gave us a gift. Betty reflected on their 50th wedding anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching the same stars that had witnessed their extraordinary journey. Not just the experience itself, but a new way of seeing everything. A cosmic perspective that makes every day a miracle. The best part, Barney added, reaching over to take her hand, is knowing that we're not alone. That consciousness exists everywhere in the universe, in forms we can barely imagine, all connected by the same spark of awareness that makes us human. Above them, the stars shone with the warm light of distant friends and neighbors, part of a vast community that stretched across the galaxy. And somewhere among those stars, beings of infinite wisdom and kindness continued their patient work of guidance and protection, watching over young civilizations with the same careful love that parents show to children, learning to take their first steps into a wider world. Betty and Barney Hill had been chosen to carry a message of hope across the years, that the universe is filled with consciousness, that intelligence takes countless beautiful forms, and that humanity's future among the stars is bright with promise and friendship. They had lived their entire lives as quiet witnesses to one of the most important truths in existence, that love and consciousness connect all things across time and space, and that we are never truly alone in the vast, wonderful cosmos that is our home. The Eternal Journey. A message written in starlight. The story of Betty and Barney Hill is more than just an account of one extraordinary night in New Hampshire. It's a gentle reminder that the universe is far more wonderful, far more populated with consciousness and kindness than our daily experience might suggest. Their journey teaches us that contact between different forms of consciousness doesn't have to be frightening or disruptive. It can be as gentle as a lullaby, as peaceful as floating on warm air currents, as beautiful as discovering new colors that have no earthly names. Betty and Barney showed us that ordinary people, a postal worker and a social worker from Portsmouth, can serve as ambassadors between worlds, carriers of cosmic messages that transform not through dramatic revelation, but through quiet example and patient wisdom. Their experience reminds us that memory itself is a form of time travel, allowing us to preserve moments of wonder and return to them whenever we need to remember that existence is miraculous. The way their memories bloomed gradually, like flowers opening in their proper season, teaches us that consciousness has its own timing, its own wisdom about when we're ready to integrate expanded awareness. Most importantly, their story whispers to us that we are not alone. Somewhere among the stars, beings of wisdom and compassion continue their patient work of guidance and protection. They watch over developing civilizations with the same careful love that gardeners show to seedlings, providing just the right amount of light and nourishment to encourage healthy growth. The universe revealed to Betty and Barney is one where consciousness is precious and celebrated, where diversity of thought and feeling is treasured rather than feared, where advanced civilizations dedicate themselves to understanding and preserving the magnificent variety of awareness that exists throughout the galaxy. In this cosmic perspective, every human being becomes significant, not just as an individual, but as a unique expression of consciousness contributing to the infinite tapestry of galactic civilization. Our creativity, our emotional depth, our ability to find beauty in simple things. These qualities make us valuable members of a community that spans the stars. The gentle beings who welcomed Betty and Barney aboard their craft continue their work today, patiently preparing humanity for the day when formal contact becomes possible. They do this not through invasion or interference, but through subtle influence, quiet inspiration, and carefully chosen encounters that plant seeds of cosmic awareness in human consciousness. Every time we look up at the night sky and feel a sense of wonder, every time we experience that mysterious certainty that we're part of something far greater than ourselves, every time we feel unexplained peace while watching the stars, we're touching the same cosmic consciousness that embraced Betty and Barney during their extraordinary journey. Their story lives on in the dreams of everyone who has ever gazed at the stars and wondered if someone might be looking back. It lives in the hope that consciousness extends far beyond our small world, taking forms both familiar and wonderfully alien. It lives in the quiet certainty that love and wisdom exist on a cosmic scale, connecting all aware beings across the vast reaches of space and time. The message Betty and Barney brought back from their gentle abduction is ultimately a love letter from the universe itself. You are not alone. You are valued. You are part of something magnificent. And when you're ready, friends are waiting for you among the stars. Tonight, when you look up at the star-filled sky, remember that you're gazing into a neighborhood populated by consciousness in countless forms. Remember that the same spark of awareness that makes you human exists throughout the galaxy in species beyond imagination. Remember that you're already part of a cosmic community based on the miracle of consciousness itself. And maybe, if you listen carefully to the gentle whisper of the night wind, you'll hear the same cosmic lullaby that once carried Betty and Barney Hill on their journey between worlds. A song that speaks of wonder, welcome, and the eternal dance of consciousness throughout the infinite universe. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers. The stars are watching over us all. Based on the experiences reported by Betty and Barney Hill, whose gentle encounter with cosmic visitors in 1961 opened a doorway between worlds and planted seeds of cosmic awareness that continue to bloom in human consciousness today.